Dear ladies and gentlemen, my name is Alkalaj. I'm official spokesperson of the Central Communication Service for President of the Republic of Kazakhstan. This is the final press conference. We'll set out the key outcomes of the 6th Astana Economic Forum and the first World Anti-Crisis Conference. About 12,000 attendants registered for the Astana Economic Forum, which involved more than 70 events, very important and significant events for Kazakhstan, for this region, for this part of the world, and our community. Delegates participate in a wide range of interesting and relevant debates and discussions. So I'm pleased and honored to introduce you to participants and of the final press conference. First of all, it's Dr. Serik Nugerbekov, co-chairman Eurasian Economic Club of Scientists Association, Senate, MP of the Kazakh Parliament, His Excellency Hongbo, United Nations and the Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, His Excellency Nestor, President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, Sir James Alexander Mirrlees, Nobel Prize laureate in economics of '96, and also we have Mr. Murat Karimsakov, President of the. He's here. Okay. Now I wanna give a floor, Your Excellency, Mr. Hongbo.
Thank you very much. And we are coming to the end of today's discussions. At this very moment, I would like to express on behalf of United Nations and also my UN colleagues participating in the discussions and forum and the conference, to express our sincere thanks to His Excellency President of Kazakhstan and its people. You've done a wonderful job, and also congratulations. I think we all agree that the world is still suffering from the effect of the world crisis, which started some 5 years ago. The world economic recovery has been slow and uneven. However, the international community is not sitting with the folded arms. We have been discussing in different forums, different platforms about the ways forward. Important issues including the future world economic governance, ways to deal with the negative effect of the financial crisis, and many other important issues. So the Astana Economic Forum and World Anti-Crisis Conference have been taking place in the right time and on the right subjects. As the previous speaker said, they have summarized the main points and achievements emerging from the discussions, and also some major points and proposals contained in the declaration, the draft declaration. So I would like to say is this: the international community is debating in the various ways the future developments, and G20 is one. What we have suggested in this conference, in this forum, will go to G20 for further deliberation and discussions. What is more important? We have United Nations, which has 193 members. They are, at this moment, are discussing the future sustainable development agenda for the whole world. your country, Kazakhstan, is playing important role in the discussions. And your outstanding diplomats are leading some of the intergovernmental process. Some of the important suggestions will go to United Nations for further consideration. They will become very solid and meaningful discussions for the future. And once again, I would like to congratulate the government people of Kazakhstan for the success of both the forum and the conference. And our sincere thanks goes again to our wonderful hosts and organizers. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for your kind words. And I think it was right time, right subject, and the right place to arrange such conference. I mean, Astana Economic Forum and World Anti-Crisis Conference. And now I want to give a floor to His Excellency Mr. Nestor Osorio, President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. My first words are to congratulate and to thank the organizers of this very important event. Very difficult to match, no matter which part of the world you go to these kind of conferences. And the issues that have been tackled and the way they have been discussed proves that the participants have been very well selected, and indeed, as we said, this has been a very inclusive and representative conference. We are in a very critical juncture, and a number of economies are struggling in terms of financing, in terms of employment, in terms of social stability. And this slowdown that we are seeing today, and that has been prolonged for longer than we thought, is creating high levels of unemployment across the world. A slower pace of poverty reduction and narrowing of fiscal space for investments in areas that are critical for achieving what we denominated the Millennium Development Goals, basic objectives to make the well-being of the humans much better. And the world of financial and economic crisis has also brought to the fore a range of concerns, including those pertaining to inequality, the importance of a stable international financial system, and furthermore, being accompanied by additional crises related to food and energy security. There is a need, and this has been extensively discussed here, of more forceful and concerted policy actions at the national and international levels to mitigate major risks and ensure a stronger and sustained economic recovery. It is clear that we must work together to move towards a more sustainable world and more fairly shared prosperity. First and foremost, employment, in my opinion, should become the primary objective of policymakers, not an afterthought in our efforts for a sustained global economic recovery. A more coherent system of global economic governance must recognize that the global economic and environmental landscape has changed dramatically. In light of the developments we have seen and the situation we live together today, it is clear that emerging economies are in a much better position than they were 20 or 30 years ago when we started to talk about the South-South cooperation. Today, these countries are much better equipped for that South-South cooperation. And there is, of course, a need for a more accountable, inclusive, and transparent system of global economic governance. The voice and participation of developing countries in international economic decision-making and norm-setting needs to be further enhanced. A renewed global partnership for development must, moreover, embrace the changing development landscape and rests on mutual accountability. Within the UN system, there is a need to put in place a more robust monitoring and accountability mechanism to monitor progress in the implementation and fulfillment of commitments made by member states in United Nations Conference, particularly through the Economic and Social Commission. So we now are embarking into a very important commitments, is what do we have to organize and how are we going to promote integral sustainable development. And this is the importance of having a good international governance, is going to be the commitment of all the countries of the world. It is developed and developing countries that will need to work together in order to develop economic, socially, and in an environmental sound atmosphere. So this is our commitment, and this conference has marked a very important landmark in this quest. Thank you very much.
It's a very important commitment. Thank you so much, Mr. Osorio. And now I want to give the floor to Sir James Mirrlees.
This has been a worthwhile conference on a most important subject, a subject on which there are many meetings, many discussions. You read about it every day in the newspapers. So that should mean that now the nations of the world know what to do and should just get busy doing it. Many of us during this conference have said things to the effect that if the countries of the world do not start solving the problem, that things are going to get worse and worse. And that is not just the economy, important though that is, but the possible social and political consequences are of a very great magnitude. Some people spoke of the possibility that there might be a European spring like the it seemed to me at the time that the way things are looking, it would be a European autumn or perhaps even winter. But inevitably, in doing a report on the ideas of the people who have been here discussing what should be done, it has to be said that not everybody is agreed, and that maybe the answers are difficult and complex. I will just say that it seemed to me that what is required is a commitment from all countries to restore the levels of investment to what they should have been if we hadn't got into this crisis. Now, you may say, why is that a commitment for every country in the world? After all, most of the world's countries, fortunately, do not suffer from this disease of deep unemployment, slow or negative growth, although many do. But it is essential for this to be done that there should be essentially international assistance of the kind that, in principle, the European Bank would be giving and the IMF would be giving to countries as they try to revive their investment. But of course we have observed that that's not what the European Bank and the IMF, although the IMF is a little more virtuous in this respect, this is not what they're getting done. They're simply asking countries to revive their finances, which will be something to be done in due course. But the urgency is the real economy, getting new capital created, getting new spending, getting people back to work. And I certainly think that can be done. And I hope very much that the message coming from this conference will be that there is every reason to expect that it should be done. Thank you.
I hope also. So thank you, sir, for your deepest thoughts and reflections. And now I want to give a floor to Mr. Christopher Pisaridis, who's a laureate of Nobel Prize. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'd like in my turn to thank the President and Government of Kazakhstan and also the Club of Scientists for this invitation. I think they've organized an excellent conference, at least many good ideas, and I do hope that despite the journalists' earlier doubts that the powers that be do listen to the recommendations, because they will improve human welfare generally. I was struck by some things that I heard at the conference. I just mentioned two. The one is the session on inequality that the United Nations UNCTAD organized today, which I haven't heard very much about it since then, but it's potentially the most serious problem in the world today is the distribution of wealth. In that there is enough, we produce enough both food and output for everyone, but it's so heavily concentrated, the distribution of it is so distorted that we cannot make use of it. And it's a real issue. I don't know the answer to that, and there were some suggestions being made in the discussion that would help, but I don't think they are catalytic solutions. And the real problem is that we know, especially following the collapse of the Soviet Union and the opening up of China, that the system that is best for economic development is one that gives the initiative to the individual, that the government constructs the legal framework, the property rights that are essential. It regulates the financial systems and other trade relations to the extent that is necessary to avoid fraud. But beyond that, once we give the right incentives to people, they will perform. They will perform in a way that will increase productivity, competitiveness, and will lead to economic growth. But we also know from the experience of the United States and maybe other countries who followed its example, that if we just do that and nothing else, there will be extreme inequalities developing in the world, and that is a problem. It could create social tensions. And ideally, I would have liked to hear more about that, although I don't know, maybe the reason it wasn't discussed even more is that we're a bit short of ideas, and maybe that's a good topic for a future discussion. The other issue that struck me, obviously, given my background and my recent interests and where I spend my time is what's happening in Europe. And here I'd like to say something other than what I said in the meeting just before, of where I think what is needed to be done to rescue the Eurozone, irrespective of what we do with the Eurozone. Unemployment in Europe is just too high for countries that are at such a state of economic development. I think it should just not be acceptable to political leaders, both within the countries that are suffering the unemployment and by what's supposed to be their partners in the European Union. Having 25% overall unemployment, having more than 50% youth unemployment, and by youth unemployment we mean unemployment of boys and girls under the age of 24, young men and young women under the age of 24. It should just be unacceptable, and yet it's tolerated because they say it's necessary to reduce debt. But you know, there are other ways of dealing with debt than shifting all the burden on the unemployed, or on low-wage workers. And in that, we do have, I mean, to some extent, I'm echoing what Mirrlees has just said, but I think it's so important that it should be said again. To an extent, we know what's needed. What we need is investment, infrastructure investments, especially, which have been neglected in Europe, again, for the sake of reducing national debt. And that can be done very easily. I mean, there is 500 billion euro put aside in Europe to rescue banks that might get into trouble. And there is nothing put aside for, practically nothing put aside for investments to rescue the unemployed who do get into trouble. They're into trouble all the time. You know, young people who suffer unemployment of a year or up to that, they have this scar, they carry the scar for many, many years to come. I mean, we know that if anything has come out of empirical labor economics, that's it. Unemployment is a problem that affects people. People lose their skills, they get disenfranchised, they feel like social rejects. And I think it's essential to emphasize that some mechanism is found, which is easy enough. I made a proposal in an earlier session, in fact, how to set up a European Growth and Competitiveness Council that will monitor the spending of that money across the European Union to give some job creation where it's desperately needed. And I'd like that to be the main message that comes out of the various European debates that I've seen, and hoping that the strong and powerful in Europe do listen and do something about it. Thank you.
Sir, thank you so much. I think after whole short statement and the conclusions, once again, I would like to express my sincere gratitude on behalf of the Kazakh government and the Kazakh side for your attendance, for your interesting and crucial points and thoughts. I think it will be very useful for Kazakh government, for Kazakh economy, and for next 7th Astana Economic Forum. We have already invitation for next forum. And once again, thank you for everyone for this press conference. Maybe Mr. Nugerbekov would like to say a few words.
Я хотел бы в заключении поблагодарить всех участников Астанинского экономического форума, Всемирной антикризисной конференции за активное участие. Особенно хочу поблагодарить представителей Организации Объединенных Наций, все 193 стран, государств-членов ООН, которые на Генеральной Ассамблее поддержали проведение нашей совместной Всемирной антикризисной конференции. И большую благодарность от имени оргкомитета лауреатам Нобелевской премии, экспертам, ученым, политикам и всем участникам нашего форума. Спасибо. Ждем вас в городе Астане. И еще раз вас приглашаю принимать активное участие на коммуникативной площадке G-Global по подготовке 7-го Астанинского экономического форума и Всемирной антикризисной конференции. Спасибо.